The libs have won a pivotal Supreme Court seat in Wisconsin in a potentially terrible omen for Republicans in the midterm elections, just hours before President Trump announces his Liberation Day tariffs that could either inaugurate America's golden age or send us into a crippling recession. I'm Michael Knowles. This is The Michael Knowles Show. Welcome back to the show. A rabbi has gone viral for declaring to federal legislators that it is not enough merely to not be anti-Semitic, but that one must be anti-anti-Semitic, which is much better than being anti-anti-anti-Semitic, but still not as good as being anti-anti-anti-anti-Semitic. We'll get to that in one moment. First, though, I want to tell you about Birch Gold. Text Knowles to 989898. In these uncertain economic times, Liberation Day, we've got tariff tensions, recession worries, and stubborn inflation. It is no surprise gold prices keep breaking records. Rather than watching from the sidelines during market volatility, consider taking proactive steps to protect your savings. That's why many Americans are connecting with Birch Gold Group. They've helped thousands of people convert existing retirement accounts into physical gold IRAs. Are you wondering if gold might be a smart hedge against inflation and economic uncertainty? Well, I have a fair bit of gold in my portfolio, and I'm feeling pretty good about it. Not only the past 6 months, but including the past week. It's looking good. And I bet a lot of you are wishing that you had gold in your portfolio. To learn more about owning physical gold in a tax-advantaged account, text Knowles, KNWLES, to 989898. Birch Gold will send you a free information kit. No obligation. Their A+ BBB rating and numerous 5-star reviews reflect why I recommend Birch Gold to help protect your savings through gold investments. The economic challenges that we're facing took decades to develop. The real question is, how long will recovery take? Another question, what will it cost us along the way? Text Knowles, KNWLES, to 989898 to connect with Birch Gold today. Not a great night last night. Actually, for me, it was a great night. You can tell I'm not in my usual studio. I'm back here at Yale. Anytime I return to my alma mater and I am not tarred and feathered, anytime I am back here and no former classmate or something tries to, murder me in my sleep, or some professor, sneaks in and tries to toss me out a window, is always a great time. Spoke at YAF to a number of students and some friends from New Haven. So you can check that out on the YAF YouTube channel. And while we were having fun, catching up with old friends, cigars and drinks, the libs won a crucial Wisconsin Supreme Court seat. This liberal judge, Susan Crawford, won the seat, and this wasn't, who cares about a Supreme Court seat in Wisconsin, right? A lot of people do. We do. President Trump does. Elon Musk does. The very highest echelons of the Republican Party were putting a lot of time, effort, money, in the case of Elon, into this race, and it didn't work out. The reason it matters is because now the Democrats are going to keep their majority in the Wisconsin Supreme Court, which means that Democrats can challenge the current congressional election map, which means that the libs can rejigger the map so that they can get more seats in the House. They can flip some seats, which means that our extremely slim Republican majority in the House is imperiled by a random night win of a Supreme Court justice in the state of Wisconsin. This might be a bad sign for the midterm elections. Wisconsin, obviously an important swing state. You don't want to read too much into it. It's an off-year election. A lot of people didn't even know this election was going on, despite President Trump and Elon Musk's attempts to raise awareness, get out the vote. There was some good news from some elections last night, which we'll get to in a moment, but we're conservatives here, so we start with all the bad stuff. This could be a bad sign because it just is always the case, virtually always the case, that the party that wins the White House loses the first midterm election. That is a big risk, in particular, when you're in a political sea change. This is not just going from Reagan to Bush to Clinton to Bush to Obama. This is a more fundamental change in our political order, so things get a little squirrelier and more difficult to predict. Also, there is a pretty decent chance of a trade war and a pretty decent chance of a recession. And I'm not saying that I don't think Trump should implement tariffs. I am pro-tariff in principle. I am not saying that Trump is going to get all the blame if the economy goes into recession. The economy was teetering under Joe Biden. The economy seemed to be artificially buoyed under Joe Biden. Any president coming in would have had a very decent chance of recession. That's even without the talk of the trade wars. And today is the day that we're going to find out about the tariffs and the potential for a trade war, because it's Liberation Day. President Trump has announced on Liberation Day he's going to unveil a slew of tariffs, reciprocal tariffs in particular, to punish countries who try to cheat us on trade. And this could either benefit the American economy because the foreign countries lower their barriers to trade and we get more U.S. goods in there into all these markets around the world, and that's really great for the American producer. Or the countries could say, no way, we're not going to do it. We're not going to play ball, and then we're going to reshore American manufacturing. You've already seen a little bit of that happening in the first 2 months of the Trump admin. Or you get all these reciprocal tariffs, and the countries just have to pay more to have access to the U.S. market, and we get a ton of money from it. Those are three things that could happen. And now, I mentioned on the show that I recently sat down with the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, and I asked, okay, those are great desires, but they conflict with each other. If you get one, you don't necessarily get the other two. If you get some of them, you actually can't get the other ones. So what's the top priority? And his answer, very diplomatically, very intelligently, was, we got to wait and see. April 2nd is the day we're going to wait and see. So high-level administration officials, at the very highest levels, don't really know what this means. I think the tariffs are supposed to be announced at 4 p.m. today. There was reporting yesterday that even top administration officials, as of yesterday, did not know who the tariffs were going to hit, what the tariffs were going to look like, which is very Trumpy. This is his great political skill, is his unpredictability. Unpredictable even to those advisors who are closest to him. One thing that also happened yesterday, though, with this unpredictable climate, is the State of Israel announced that it would end all tariffs on U.S. imports before Liberation Day, which is a good idea. That's a smart move, Israel. I think other countries around the world should do that as well. Because if there are, basically, the State of Israel waited until the very last moment, said, okay, I still can't get a read on this guy. I don't want to call his bluff. They went all the way up to the very line and they said, okay, you know what? We're done with tariffs on U.S. goods. Please don't tariff us. And the reaction from a lot of people is, wait a second, Israel had tariffs on U.S. goods? Wait a second, Israel, a state that we fund, Israel, a state that would not exist if the U.S. military didn't protect it, they had tariffs on U.S. goods. It's not just Israel. There's some people who want to single out Israel for every single issue. It's not just Israel. It's like every country on earth has tariffs on U.S. goods, where we think, hold on, these are good allies of ours. Hold on, they're good trading partners. Hold on, we have such a great relationship. Wait, India has these massive tariffs on U.S. auto? Hold on, the European Union has massive tariffs on all sorts of U.S. goods, agricultural goods, all sorts of goods. Wait a second, what? We pay for Europe. Europe would not exist right now, or would have been conquered by a hostile foreign power. Actually, Europe has been conquered by a hostile foreign power because of mass migration, but that's a separate point. Europe would look totally different than it does right now, if not for the U.S. military protection, the U.S. military, which is the European military. You telling me they're putting tariffs on our goods? So one of the consequences of Trump's unpredictable tariff policy and all his really tough talk on tariffs, one of the consequences that I haven't heard people talk about a lot is just raising awareness that so many other countries are ripping us off. So many other countries have tariffs on U.S. goods. Now, what does that mean for Trump? Does he get all the way up to the line and then back off the tariffs? We'll see. I've told you from the beginning, I have no idea what Trump is doing with the tariffs. And don't just say, well, Michael, you got to get better at your job. You're a commentator, you're a podcast host, you're a pundit, you're supposed to know. Hey, if the Treasury Secretary doesn't know, if Trump's own Treasury Secretary doesn't know, I'm not going to know, okay? And anyone tells you they do know what Trump is doing with these tariffs is lying to you. I've talked to multiple Trump world figures, administration figures, people around the president, and the ones who tell me they do know what he's doing with the tariffs, they all give me different answers, okay? So they don't know. And I have said for weeks now, if Trump is serious about the tariffs, he's talking like he's serious, okay? From the campaign. We're going to have a new golden age. We're going to be like William McKinley. Tariffs are my favorite word. He's echoing Abraham Lincoln, who said, you give me a tariff, I'll give you the greatest country on earth. But also, Trump is a really good bluffer. So I don't know. And that's the real answer, okay? And anyone who tells you otherwise is lying to you. Speaking of unpredictability, President Trump has just withdrawn his nomination for UN ambassador. Elise Stefanik, a New York congressman who Trump put up for UN ambassador, he withdrew her. He didn't have to withdraw Pete Hegseth. He didn't have to withdraw Bobby Kennedy. He didn't have to withdraw Tulsi Gabbard. He didn't have to withdraw Kash Patel. All of the supposedly controversial nominees, he didn't have to withdraw. Elise Stefanik was a shoo-in for UN ambassador. Why is he withdrawing her nomination? The answer does not bode well for Republicans. We'll get to that in one moment. First, though, I want to talk to you about Legacy Box. Go to legacybox.com/Knowles. If you are not able to watch old home videos anymore because no one has a VCR, well, you need to go check out Legacy Box, okay? I absolutely love these guys. Legacy Box makes it super simple to convert all of your old family memories, your pictures, your videos, all the rest of it, into an updated format that will allow you to preserve them forever. You just mail them in, they will handle the rest. I have loved Legacy Box. I've worked with them for years. I've used them I'm trying to think, the first time I used Legacy Box must have been at this point 5-7 years ago. And I still have so much stuff that I can't wait to send the next batch in. Right now, check protecting your memories off your spring cleaning to-do list with Legacy Box. It'll also free up space in your attic. Go to legacybox.com/Knowles, K-N-O-W-L-E-S, shop their $9 tape sale, and get 90 days free access to Legacy Box Cloud. That is legacybox.com/Knowles, K-N-O-W-L-E-S, to unlock this incredible offer. Lost civilizations, Nephilim, ancient megaliths. In this episode of Michael Land, I sit down with the rogue archaeologist, an explorer, a writer, a modern-day Indiana Jones, Timothy Alberino, to uncover what your history books perhaps won't tell you about the ancient past. At least some interesting theories about it. Check out this teaser.
Many of these extraordinary megalithic sites around the world were built in the age before the flood. The ancient Egyptians and the Greeks and the Romans and all the rest of them, they believe that the very same thing occurred.
I don't even know if people are going to believe me when I say this. When you started talking about the aliens and the antimatter, all the lights went off. They have a $4,000 confidence monitor. It like fizzed, like the picture got all crazy.
Maybe somebody's signaling to us to shut up.
Watch the full episode now on the Michael Knowles YouTube channel or catch the uncensored ad-free version exclusively on DailyWire Plus. Trump had to withdraw his nominee for UN ambassador, Elise Stefanik, because the Republican congressional majority is too slim. Okay, he posted this a few days ago now, but it's an important story. This was a very tight majority. I don't want to take a chance on anyone else running for Elise's seat in the House of Representatives. The people, he said it's essential that we maintain every Republican seat in Congress. The people love Elise, and with her, we have nothing to worry about come Election Day. There are others that can do a good job at the United Nations. I totally agree. The UN ambassador doesn't really matter. It seems like a cool job because the job is basically just to showboat around some of the worst people on earth, and it's not a ton of responsibility. You could plug and play a lot of people in there. Elise Stefanik is a solid hold for a Republican seat in New York. New York, obviously, a very blue state. So the withdrawal has nothing to do with Stefanik. When President Trump withdrew his first attorney general pick, Matt Gaetz, it was because Gaetz had baggage and the senators wouldn't vote for him. Here, Stefanik doesn't have any baggage that matters to the senators. It's just that we got to hold Congress. Congress is looking increasingly tenuous. Trump withdrew Stefanik before the Wisconsin Supreme Court win for the Democrats, the Wisconsin Supreme Court win that could even further imperil the Republican majority. Now, there is some good news. The silver lining from the elections yesterday is that the GOP held on to 2 seats in Florida in the House. That's the seat formerly held by Michael Waltz, the national security advisor under Trump, and the seat previously held by Matt Gaetz, the aforementioned Matt Gaetz, who resigned from Congress after he was nominated for AG. Then Trump withdrew him for AG, or he resigned. He withdrew himself from the AG race, and now he has a TV show. So a Republican should have won those seats. This is not a huge win for Republicans. It's good. We would have been in a lot of trouble had a Democrat won those seats, but this means that the Republican majority in Congress is real slim. You've got natural headwinds against us in the midterm elections, and if the election last night in Wisconsin is any indication, and if the Liberation Day turmoil is any indication, and if gamblers and betting markets are any indication, Republicans are going to face a tough time in the midterms, which means we have a closing window for Republican and conservative policies. Trump won his second term. In principle, he was already a lame duck the minute he was elected to his second term. Now, because Trump is a brilliant politician, and because Trump plays on unpredictability, he keeps floating out to the liberal media that he might run for a third term. Yeah, maybe, I don't know, there are ways to do it. Maybe I'll have a fourth term. Maybe I'll cross the Rubicon and inaugurate myself Emperor Caesar Trump, and Barron will be Octavian, and he'll fight a war with Mark Antony. I don't know who Mark Antony would be in this case. Marco Rubio? Marco Antony? I don't know. Anyway, my historical analogy is breaking down. He keeps floating this out there so that he doesn't seem like a lame duck, which a second-term president necessarily is. This means that Trump is going to rush through policy. He's done an amazing job. We are tired. I don't know if we're tired of winning, but we are tired. There's been so much good policy that comes out of the first 2 months. But the window's closing. It ain't going to be here forever. And when Republicans, not when, if, I don't want to be too pessimistic, if Republicans lose that majority in the House, okay, maybe we'll get some judges, right? But a lot of that policy that we're looking for, and a lot of the executive orders being codified into law, which allows them to endure past the second Trump term, that's going nowhere. Now, speaking of Congress, Cory Booker. Democrat Cory Booker, I am Spartacus, a little histrionic, very, very theatrical. Cory Booker spoke for 25 hours yesterday in the U.S. Senate. This broke the record for the longest Senate floor speech. Blew past my friend Ted Cruz. Blew past, what was it? Did Strom Thurmond hold the record? He blew past it. However, usually when we cover an event like this, we would say it was the longest filibuster ever. The way this is being covered in the media, it's the longest Senate floor speech ever. Because usually, some people are going to ask, why are senators speaking for hours and hours on end anyway? The reason that they do it is to filibuster legislation. So if there's some law coming down the pike that they don't like, a senator, just a single senator, can get up there and gum up the works, can hold up that legislation, and in so doing, raise popular awareness about the legislation by just speaking forever. As long as he can stand. As long as he can stand and his vocal cords work, he can stand up there and read the phone book. He can read Green Eggs and Ham like Ted Cruz did. He can keep pushing. Cory Booker didn't do that. There was no legislation he was filibustering. The whole process is quite theatrical, but at least it serves an actual legislative function usually. In this case, Cory Booker wasn't serving any legislative function. He was just making a big show of himself, which is so perfect. It so sums up not only Cory Booker's political career, but just the Democrats right now broadly. It's like decaf coffee. They're decaf coffee. I've said for years on this show, I've said since I think maybe the first episode of my show, that one of the defining features of the left is that they want the appearance of the thing, but not the essence of the thing. So they want marriage, but they don't want sexual difference in babies. They just want the appearance of marriage. They're Diet Coke is what they are. They're decaf coffee. They don't want the thing that makes the thing what it is. And in this case, Cory Booker, he wanted the headlines. He wanted to have the record for the longest floor speech. He wanted to seem, like he's Mr. Smith goes to Washington. But he's not actually doing any legislating. He's not even impeding legislation. He's just putting on a play. At least wait until the Republicans have some bill. But what's he going to... This is the big problem. The reason that Cory Booker can't do his big histrionic show to try to launch his next presidential campaign on legislation is because the legislation that Trump is advancing is very popular. What's he going to, he's going to filibuster the Lake and Riley Act? What's he going to filibuster? The tax cuts? No. So he just gives this long speech vaguely about executive orders that he can't impede from the Senate because it's a different branch of government, has nothing to do with the legislature. That's really pathetic. This is my silver lining, as I'm warning you all that the midterms are going to be brutal, and we got a bad sign about it yesterday, and the world is falling to pot, and zillions will die, and everything. The silver lining here is the Democrats have nothing. Even when they're not only are they not advancing anything, they're not even stopping anything. Now, speaking of Congress, a rabbi has just testified to federal legislators that it is not enough to be not anti-Semitic. You have to be anti-Semitic.
Anti-Semitism is not just an age-old prejudice. It is a contemporary crisis manifesting on campuses across the nation. It is not enough for individuals or institutions to merely claim they are not anti-Semitic. As my father once taught me, it is not enough for people, especially public figures, to be neutral or not be anti-Semitic. One must be anti-Semitic. We must demand the same of our universities and government institutions. This hearing, in my opinion, is an attempt to be just that, anti-Semitic.
So many people, especially on the right, are comparing this guy to Ibram Kendi. Because Ibram Kendi says it's not enough not to be racist. You have to be anti-racist. And anti-Semitism is this particular form of racism. It's particular to the Jews because the Jews are a tribe in the sense that we don't really have anymore in modernity. It's both a religious group and an ethnicity, kind of. It's made up of multiple ethnicities, but there's a physical aspect to it and a cultural, religious, ideological aspect to it as well. So there just aren't a lot of examples of that. In fact, the Jews in many ways are a singular people, and in this way too. So it's the analogy I think is fair to compare anti-Semitism to anti-racism, and it's why I think a lot of conservatives are recoiling. But I think, okay, fine. That kind of commentary is totally fine, ideological. On the surface, they have a point. But let's go a little bit deeper for a second. The rabbi is saying, look, there's a lot of anti-Jew stuff going on. It's really kicking off. And I think that's true. Certainly on the internet. The internet isn't always real life, but it's happening on university campuses. There probably has been a tick up in that. I don't agree with this rabbi. I think this rabbi is wrong, not only from an abstract ideological perspective, but even from a Jewish perspective. I don't think it is good for the Jews for people to be anti-Semitic. Because the problem that this rabbi, I think, is addressing is that people are blaming the Jews for everything. Actually, in the phrase of a white supremacist, of Sam Francis, who was a very mainstream right-wing columnist. I think he was a syndicated columnist. He worked for the Washington Times, and then he became kind of a white supremacist at the end of his life, which puts a little stain on his memory in most quarters. But there was a famous exchange where he was writing, some neo-Nazi type guy wrote to him and was complaining that Sam Francis, pretty hardcore fella, didn't blame the Jews enough or for enough things. And Francis's response was, "You people, you're so tedious. You wake up and stub your toe in the morning and you blame the Jews." And but so that's what the rabbi is responding to, is this kind of ticking up of blaming the Jews for just about everything. And if that is the case, then you don't want people to be anti-Semitic. In other words, the prudential solution to people blaming the Jews for everything is not people thanking the Jews for everything, which is really what that is. Anti-Semitism is, what would that be? Philo-Semitism? Okay. But the answer to blaming the Jews for everything, thinking about the Jews all the time with regard to every single subject, as some people do, it's all they ever want to talk about. The answer to that is not thinking about the Jews with regard to every single subject and just saying they're good. No, they're not bad. You guys are wrong for pinning everything on the Jews and saying it's bad. I pin everything on the Jews and say that it's good. That's not the answer. The answer is don't think about the Jews 24 hours a day. The answer actually is just don't. The answer is what he's inveighing against, which is just not being anti-Semitic. It's not. I think it was Mr. Davies' observation that some of the Jew stuff is like it's kind of like climate change. You know, everything is climate change. And as I pointed out, that makes sense because the Jews obviously control the weather. So it's kind of like the new climate change. You know, the polar ice caps are melting. It's climate change. The LA burned down because they don't have deforestation policies. Oh, it's probably climate change. Actually, the Obama administration screwed up its tax policy. That was probably climate change. A war broke out in Eastern Europe. I would say it's climate change. You know, it's a similar thing. So the rabbi can be wrong ideologically and in principle or what. That's all fine. A lot of other people are talking about that. But prudence is the paramount political virtue. I talk about it a lot, just even prudentially, very pragmatically for everyone involved, including and especially the Jews. You know, you don't want anti-anti-Semitism. You don't want anti-anti-Semitism. You want to just like be normal and recognize there are other things in the world to do and think about. That doesn't have to occupy your mind like 24 hours a day. Okay, you know what does have to occupy your mind 24 hours a day? How comfortable the shoes are that you're wearing. That's why I want to talk to you about Tecovas. Go to tecovas.com/Knowles. You know what they say? Anywhere worth going is worth going in good boots. Find your perfect pair with Tecovas. These are not just any boots. They are a testament to craftsmanship that speaks to both generational ranchers and first-time boot enthusiasts alike. Tecovas is great. It was born in Texas in 2015. They have become one of the biggest names in boots, and they're fabulous. I know a lot of you out there are going to wear cowboy boots. It's hard for me to pull it off. I have a pair of Tecovas cowboy boots. I wear them about once or twice a year when I work up the courage. But what I really wear from Tecovas, the Monterey shoes in Midnight Bison. Now, I have actually a fair number of nice shoes, you know, from wardrobe and things like that. I wore these shoes, these new shoes from Tecovas. I don't know that I've ever gotten more compliments on a pair of shoes in my life. And I got some pretty good stuff. These shoes, that's the one to get. It's almost like a Prince Albert slipper, you know, the kind you'd wear to a cigar bar, but it's much more versatile. They're just fabulous, and the price cannot be beat. I don't know why they're priced so well for that quality leather, that kind of design. Right now, get 10% off at tecovas.com/Knowles, K-N-O-W-L-E-S, when you sign up for emails and texts. 10% off, tecovas.com/Knowles, tecovas.com/Knowles. See site for details. Tecovas, point your toes west. Speaking of anti-Jewish protests, I'm already breaking my rule and continuing to talk about it like that rabbi says I should. Columbia graduates are tearing up their diplomas to protest the arrest of that anti-Israel activist who had been a Columbia student, then he graduated. I think he's being deported, Mahmoud Khalil. Here's the demonstration.
Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free Palestine! SIPA alumni are not proud. We are enraged.
Woo! So first of all, the minute I see these super lib girls tearing up their Columbia degree, my first reaction, this is a little bit inside baseball, I bet they went to Barnard. Okay, Barnard, for those who don't pay attention to these, Barnard was the sister school of Columbia, and it's easier to get into, but that you get a Columbia degree if you graduate, and it's full of super lib women. So first, I am not even convinced. I am a Columbia diploma protest truther. I'm not even convinced those are real Columbia degrees, but let's say they were. Let's say these people actually graduated from Columbia, and they're tearing up their diplomas. That's a perfectly understandable and reasonable thing to do because those diplomas are worthless. This was my speech last night at Yale. It was substantially about how little Ivy League degrees really convey in terms of a person's intelligence and education today. That wasn't always the case. They used to actually suggest something about a person's intelligence and education. Today, though, Harvard is announcing the need for remedial math courses, okay, because Harvard students can't do basic algebra. So it just doesn't signify very much. In fact, the point of my speech yesterday is that the average New Haven resident sitting in Sally's Pizza down the street has a better grasp on reality than the average Yale graduate. That's not pandering, that's not populism, that's a fact. Because the New Haven resident, the average New Haven resident sitting in the pizza shop here, might not have read the phenomenology of spirit in the original German, but that person does know what a woman is. That person does know that nations have borders. That nation does know that criminals belong in prisons. The average Yale graduate doesn't know any of those things, doesn't know really basic stuff about what the human person is, how we function in society. And I don't want to knock Yale. I really do love my alma mater, even though it's a little kooky a lot of the time. Columbia makes Yale look like the most reasonable institution in the world. Columbia's totally lost it. So what are they protesting? They're protesting that this guy got deported because he was a grad student and he protested Israel. And the protests were not only protesting Israel, but actually harassing Jewish students. All right, there are real debates. There are serious debates to be had over the state of Israel, over Gaza, over free speech on campus, which is a separate issue, but it's related in this case. Something I think we can all agree on, though, is that those diplomas are worthless. You should tear it up. Nothing lost and nothing gained. Speaking of deportations, you probably heard from your liberal cousin who's posting this all over Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and shouting it to you from the rooftop, that the Trump administration mistakenly deported someone. These mass deportations, the Trump admin mistakenly deported a Maryland father named Kilmar Armando Abrego. Mistakenly deported him to El Salvador, and this is the worst thing that's ever happened in the world. I'm not defending that. Assuming this is true, that's a bad thing. I feel for the guy, for sure. And the Trump administration is admitting in a court filing that they did mistakenly deport this guy. The filing comes as a result of this lawsuit over this guy's removal. He's a Salvadoran national who in 2019 was granted protected status by an immigration judge, prohibiting the federal government from sending him to El Salvador. So they're saying, see, because this one guy who had legal protected status, he was a Salvadoran national, he came here pretty recently, pretty easy to mistake him for an illegal alien, but he did have protected status and he was deported, and you know, that's bad, and that's why we need to stop deporting any illegal alien, including the face-tattooed Satan-worshiping gangsters. That's what the libs are going to tell you. To me, I look at this and I say, hold on. The best you can find amid a relatively large number of deportations, rapid deportations within 2 months, the best you can find is one guy who slipped through the cracks. That is not an argument against the mass deportations. That is an argument for the efficiency and effectiveness of it. That's a mark in Trump's favor. You're always going to have some fail rate. And so the libs are going to say, well, this is terrible. We can't tolerate this enforcing of the law, of immigration law, because one guy accidentally was deported and it might take a little bit to get him back. Okay, well, let's apply that logic to mass migration. The Democrats have intentionally engaged in a process of mass illegal migration. Welcomed the invasion across the border. It was totally preventable. Trump stopped it pretty much on day one, without any new laws, without anything. Biden welcomed these people across the border. And you know who slipped through the cracks there? The guy who murdered Lake and Riley. The illegal aliens who have attempted to rape and then murder many innocent young American girls. Does that mean we should stop mass migration? I think that's a pretty strong argument, actually, to stop mass migration. Democrats don't want to hear that. You know who slipped through the cracks? The 75,000 Americans a year who were poisoned and killed because of fentanyl that crossed that border illegally. That's a pretty strong argument for shutting down mass migration, certainly illegal immigration. Democrats don't want to hear that. What about even less immediately fatal issues? The millions and millions and millions of economic migrants who come across and depress American wages and cause great injustice to the American worker and cause big cultural problems and make us press one for English and seriously threaten cultural assimilation because we have the highest foreign-born percentage for the population that we've ever had in America. What about that slipping through the cracks? You won't hear Democrats say a peep about any of those things. But one guy who somewhat recently was granted protected status by some immigration judge, that guy, one guy slips through the cracks, we have to stop enforcing all immigration law. It's totally bogus. It's totally disingenuous. And I feel for the guy, and I hope he gets to come back. I hope it's relatively easy for the guy to come back. I'm not saying we need to violate the law. But, you know, if you sneak into this country illegally, it's a dangerous game, buddy, and sometimes bad things are going to happen to you. Maybe, you know, play at your own risk. Yesterday, our colleague Matt Walsh testified before the California Assembly on legislation to ban male students from competing in women's sports, which is, of course, just common sense. This fight is not over because of one bad day at the legislature. When the Daily Wire takes on a cause, we go all in. We're going to continue to fight to defend women and women's sports everywhere. With your support, we can keep covering the issues that matter. We can keep making the content that shapes culture, and we can keep making a difference. Join the fight now at dailywire.com/subscribe. My favorite comment yesterday is from Naomi Garrett 50, who says, Michael, we need you to do a whole podcast episode in that French accent. Wow. Oh la la, did I use a French accent yesterday? Mr. Davies, did I speak in a French accent?
Yeah, unfortunately you did.
I did? Yeah, what? Hold on. I don't even remember what that was in service of. I could also wave the flag of the French army. So. Am I right? Am I right? It's a white hanky. My French is so bad, but my accent is so over the top and outrageous. Some people actually think I speak that language. I do not. Speaking of controversial government actions, there's a bill going through the Colorado legislature, Colorado House Bill 251312, that would categorize dead naming, that is referring to someone by his name, like the name on his birth certificate, not the name that he makes up for himself later on. It would categorize dead naming as child abuse. The bill, according to its summary, would direct courts that are making child custody decisions, family courts, determining parenting time, how much daddy gets to see the kid. It would instruct them to consider, quote, dead naming, misgendering, or threatening to publish material related to an individual's sex change services as types of coercive control. That is to say, if parents split, if they're even fighting within a marriage, and then they split, and the mother wants to trans the kid, and the father, we've heard a lot of stories like this is not an abstract hypothetical thing, this happens. The father says, well, hold on, I don't want you to castrate my son. I don't want you to destroy my kid. That's horrible. I'm not going to play along with this and pretend that my son is actually a daughter. That would be terrible. And the mother goes to the judge in Colorado and says, hey, my ex-husband is referring to my son, my child, by his dead name. The father could lose visitation rights. The father could be cut out of the father could be convicted of. And it's awful, and the shallow conservative response is going to be to pop a blood vessel and say, this is crazy. But think about it a little bit more deeply. Think about it from the perspective of the libs. Why shouldn't that be child abuse? Verbal abuse is already considered a form of child abuse. You don't need to just take the belt off and start smacking your kid across the face to be accused of child abuse. Things you say to your kid can be and are considered in many places abusive. In this case, they're saying, look, the son is really a daughter. And so it will cause great emotional distress to call that child by his dead name. I mean, it's really cultish, even the phrase dead name. It's kind of like a rebirth, a baptism into the Gnostic faith of transgenderism. But from their perspective, that is verbal abuse. That'd be like calling a child a bunch of vulgar words, screaming at the child. It's the same thing. So it's going to be very tempting for conservatives to say, hold on, are you kidding me? Using the wrong pronouns or something, that's now, and a father is going to lose custody of his kid. No. We should accept the premise, yeah, verbal abuse can be. But calling your son by his real name is not. What is calling your son by a girl's name. What is this kind of gets back to that rabbi's point on anti-Semitism. It's not enough not just to be not really pro-transing the kids. You have to be anti-transing the kids. You need to be pro having the kids live in accord with reality. We need to have a little bit more spine. We're talking about chopping off various appendages. You got to have a spine and some other anatomical features too here. In other words, conservatives need to go on the offense. And we need to ban transing the kids. We need to punish parents who would trans the kids. We need to define it as to trans the kids. We need to define it as to refer to the child by the wrong kind of name or the wrong kind of pronouns. Or we need to do what the libs are doing, but in the direction of justice and goodness and morality. What the libs are doing here is legislating in the direction of wickedness and injustice and really hideous stuff. We need to do it the other way. It's not, we have the wind at our backs. This is a 90-10 issue, 95-5 issue here. The vast majority of people agree that transing the kids is hideous. So let's go on the offensive here. Let's lock up the parents, teachers, adults who would abuse kids in this way. And I don't know, let's send them to El Salvador. Let's get that one guy back who wasn't supposed to go to El Salvador. Let's send all these people to El Salvador. Let's go on the offensive here. Because if we're just playing not to lose, then the minute that political winds change again, the libs are going to go even further. They're going to take kids away from their fathers because their fathers won't pretend that the kids are the opposite sex. Because the fathers won't abuse the kids. Now, speaking of young people and abuses, horrifying piece in the New York Times. That could just be a daily segment. Here's today's horrifying piece in the New York Times. New York Times, this baby was carefully selected as an embryo. Posted by Noor Siddiqui. If you've not heard Noor Siddiqui is creating lots and lots of human beings, creating lots and lots of embryos to custom design the perfect baby. In her mind, the perfect baby. And then we'll just kill all of her other babies. But we're talking lots and lots and lots. Because when I was in elementary school, my mom started going blind. Retinitis pigmentosa, no family history, no treatments, no cure. I got lucky, she didn't. It led me to build Orchid Incorporated, so my baby and everyone else's gets to win the genetic lottery, avoid blindness, and hundreds of severe genetic diseases. Today, the New York Times covered the tech we've spent years building, whole genome embryo screening for hundreds of diseases, not in theory, not in mice, in humans, in IVF centers right now. Okay, so it's the baby store. I talk about how IVF is really bad, and even some people will say, well, my niece is from IVF, my child is from IVF. I can't admit that because I love the good that has come about from this process, I can't bring myself to admit that the means of attaining that good was evil. And I understand that's just an emotional problem for people, but this is like really, really evil stuff. The baby store, which is to say the IVF procedure, which usually entails surrogacy, or which often entails surrogacy. Because the key here is not even just how evil IVF and surrogacy and the baby selling industry is, but all of the euphemisms. Because even conservatives who hear this story probably fell prey to the euphemism trap that Noor Siddiqui has laid here. I got lucky, she didn't. It's so that my baby and everyone else's gets to win the genetic lottery and avoid blindness. Isn't that good? The way you're picturing this is, she took the sperm and the egg and she cooked up a baby and she kind of changed some of the genes so that the baby was going to come out perfect. In other words, you think that what she's doing is something that's totally bioethically licit, which is to repair an injury in a person, even down at the level of the genome. But that's not what she did. What she did isn't to improve anyone's health. She just engaged in an unnatural kind of selection, a microcosm of the theory of evolution, according to which she made a dozen, 2 dozen, many dozens, hundreds of human beings, and then killed virtually all of her own children. So she could, as though she had a litter of children, and she went through them, she goes, not tall enough, not blonde enough, a little too ugly, it might be a little too fat. All of you babies, I'm just going to kill all of you, my babies, because I've found the one perfect baby. God help that child growing up. I found the one perfect, and you're the one that I won't murder. That's how that went down. I'm not being hyperbolic at all. I'm not twisting this at all. That's what she did. And through the euphemisms of, it's winning the genetic lottery. Oh, we're helping people. Oh, this is medical care. You can hear a ambulance siren in the background. It's a fitting time for that to arrive. Absolutely ghastly stuff. Before I go, this is truly out of a horror movie. She posts about how she does it. Why is she creating all these IVF babies? She says, sex is for fun. Embryo screening is for babies. I said that in a video, people freaked out, but it's true, and it will only get more true as the tech improves. We screen for what matters. Nothing matters more than health. So she's saying right off the bat, I'm going to separate the procreative from the conjugal act. I'm going to take the sexual revolution to its logical conclusion. Sex is only for pleasure, for titillating you. It's only for your own selfish pleasure. Has nothing to do with two people coming together, two people in love, whose love becomes so real that it actually becomes another human being. No. I'm going to go and I'm going to sleep with someone or do some sex stuff with someone just so that I can feel some pleasure, get a real hit of dopamine, oxytocin. And then I'm going to clinically cook up a bunch of children in a cauldron, in my little witch cauldron, my little witch petri dish. I'm going to cook up a bunch of children. Then I'm going to determine which of my children don't quite please me enough, because I don't like the cut of their jib. And I'm going to kill those children. I'm going to murder them. And then the one that I think is going to turn out all right, that's the one I'm going to pick. Can't wait for the family Christmas card. Doesn't that sound so warm and cozy? Horrifying, dystopian stuff. Not 10 years in the future, not 100 years in the future. Happening right now, coming to a baby store near you. Today is Woke Wednesday. The rest of the show continues now. You do not want to miss it. Become a member. Use code Knowles, KNWLES, at checkout for 2 months free on all annual plans.